Since we have 4 panelists today, I'm going to get started right away. This is Erin McGurl. I'm Executive Director of the Bibliographical Society of America, and I'm so happy to have everyone here for the next Book, Print, Artists, Scholars of Color collective event with Irene Chan, Devin Fitzgerald, Colette Fu, and Radha Pandey. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. In a moment, I'm going to put a link to our code of conduct in the chat. We do expect you to abide by these guidelines when you participate in one of our events. And I also want to let folks know that this event is being recorded. So if you don't want to participate in a recorded event, please sign out and watch the video when we post it to YouTube. You'll see that we do have live captioning, and in a second I'll also put into the chat a link to view that closed captioning in other languages. Other languages offered are Spanish, French, Italian, German, Dutch, and I think a couple of others that I'm sorry I'm not remembering now, but just enter that into your browser and you'll be able to read a transcript in those other languages. At the end of this session, we will have a Q&A. So the panelists won't be taking questions as they go along, but rather we encourage you to enter your questions into the Zoom Q&A module. And if you wish to use the chat to make comments or start discussions with the panelists and other attendees, you can use the chat to do that. Okay, so last but not least, I'm going to introduce Devin Fitzgerald, who's moderating today. He is curator of rare books and the history of printing at UCLA Library. So thanks, Devin, for moderating, and take it away.
Thanks, Erin, and welcome everyone to the second meeting of the Book, Print, Artists, Scholars of Color Collective, hosted by the BSA and generously funded by David Solo. So thank you, David, for all of that support. Book artist Tia Blassingame founded the Book, Print, Artists, Scholars of Color Collective to build community and collaborations with BIPOC book, print practitioners, and scholars. The collective represents a growing community of more than 20 book artists, scholars, librarians, papermakers, letterpress printers, printmakers, and curators. And so this is very much a new effort, and it's founded with Tia's vision and genius. So before I introduce our speakers today, I'll just let you know what we're doing. We'll have 4 short presentations, about 12 minutes each, and then at the end we'll have a moderated Q&A. Our first presentation will be by Irene Chan. Chan is a multidisciplinary artist who works conceptually in print media, papermaking, installation, storytelling, performance, and book arts. She is an associate professor of visual arts and affiliate faculty of Asian Studies at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Her books and works on paper have been exhibited internationally and held in 80 public collections, including the Walker Art Center, the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, Tate Modern, Victoria and Albert Museum, and British Library in London. Chan established the Chan Press, through which she has self-published prints and 35 artist books to date. Our next speaker will be Colette Fu. Fu received her MFA in Fine Arts Photography from the Rochester Institute of Technology in 2003, and soon after began devising complex compositions that incorporate photographs and pop-up paper engineering. She has designed for award-winning stop-motion animation commercials and freelance for clients including Greenpeace, Vogue China, Canon Asia, and the Delaware Disaster Research Center. Fu's numerous awards include the 2018 Megan Dorfer Prize for Best Paper Engineered Artist Book, a 2008 Fulbright Research Fellowship to China, and grants from the Independence Foundation, Leeway Foundation, and FOCO and Puffin Foundation. Her solo show, Wanderer Wanderer, The Pop-Ups of Colette Fu, was presented in the National Museum of Women in the Arts in 2016-17. In 2017, Fu created the world's largest pop-up book at Philadelphia Photo Arts Center, measuring 14 by 21 feet. She teaches pop-up courses and community workshops to marginalized populations at art centers, universities, and institutions internationally. Our third speaker, Radha Pandey, is a papermaker and letterpress printer. She earned her MFA in book arts from the University of Iowa Center for the Books, where she was a recipient of the Iowa Arts Fellowship. She practices European, Eastern, and Indo-Islamic papermaking techniques and teaches book arts classes in India, Europe, and the US. Her book, Anatomia Botanica, won the Micah Book Award in 2014 and received an honorable mention at the 15th Karl Herzog Award for Excellence in Book Design. In 2018, her book, Deep Time, won the Joshua Heller Memorial Award. Currently, Radha is working on an artist book inspired by Mughal floral portraiture from the 17th century, for which all the paper will be handmade in the traditional Indo-Islamic style. And up last will be me, who Aaron has already introduced. So without further ado, I'll ask Irene to take it away.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to close my video and move to share screen. Hello, I am Irene Chan of Chan Press. I'm going to show you some of my work leading to the subjects of identity, immigrant and forgotten histories, personal, and those of the early 1800s Chinese in the Americas. Prior to that, I was making work about my personal experience of being a follower of the Tao, Chinese philosophy. Then something happened and my work changed. One day I came back from New York on the train. I was in DC's Union Station. I was tired and hungry, so I went down to the food court to get some food. I sat at a very small one-person round table and was eating. Suddenly, a man sat down and proceeded to speak to me aggressively. He started saying things that were offensive, but also very intrusive. I asked him politely to leave. I said that I was tired and that I wanted to eat my dinner alone, but he would not leave. He said, but I waited all day and you were the only person I like. I felt trapped. I was very upset and felt violated. When I came home, I was trying to think of a way to get my power again. I did not sleep that night or the next few nights because I came up with Asian American ? Project. Business cards with text that respond to comments and questions that strangers ask Asian Americans. Every week since age 12, I am asked 1 to 10 of the same questions. Since these questions and comments are common to other Asian Americans as well, I created a set of 36 business cards to flash or hand out for the appropriate moments. Through the intersection of questions and answers, lasting racial stereotypes and myths of the concept of the Asian American are revealed. After a while, for me, having been born in the United States, I felt perceived as a perpetual tourist and not an American. Thank you. You speak English so good too. I'm not always quiet. I just don't want to speak to you. And this to answer, go back to where you came from. After doing research about stereotypes of Chinese specific to America, I decided to make a one-person live performance. My Asianist look has led to a great many misunderstandings, from the humorous to the demoralizing absurd. I rediscover appearance on my quest to belong. Along the way are American films and history, men, women, body, gestures, and color as seen through language play, spoken word reenactments, satire song, and sculptural books worn on or held with the body. From Theater News, Sweden, intricate and thought-provoking. On the left, I was talking about the early Chinese women who were tricked or sold and brought to America, trafficked. In the 1870 census, 61% of the 3,536 Chinese women in California had their occupations listed as prostitution. On the right is the artist book, Look Just Like. I flip a flexagon book of Asian portraits that people have said to me that I look just like. Zi Zhang, Margaret Cho. There are 8 more so far. Yellow Skin Bracelet tells the story of someone seeing a bright yellow bracelet as the exact same color as my skin. Moonface Typecast. The lyrics satire a well-known song from an American film that used yellowface. This song shares my experience of watching a lot of television as a kid and how Asian Americans were depicted. These stereotypes have warped my perceptions of appearance of myself and other Asians and have impacted my relationships until I rediscovered appearance. A railroad track holds miniature books that tell about the history of early American towns and the violence against the Chinese. Stories about the people of 162 towns are each depicted in its own book on railroad ties. It is 39 feet long, 12 meters, with the 162 towns. And as it grows, I can find more of the 200 towns. This link is an online book animated where you can read about all the towns. You can move forward. Then open a book. You can read it and scroll down. Close the book, and then continue down the track. An incomplete alphabet is in hand calligraphy of a personal story. The long paper piece scroll is suspended on a series of school desks. Some of the writing is missing. It's about having an accent when speaking Chinese, even though I had good penmanship. I was labeled and put into what they called then special classes. I and my classmates learned that eventually, we, not others, not an institution, define ourselves. During the opening, I ironed the missing segments of my story to complete the alphabet. And I have exhibited in different places and have found different types of school desks. An Incomplete Friendship is a story about my time as an elementary school member in an all-girl Filipina gang and what I learned about friendship. The piece is performed with hand gestures in shadows on several schoolyard grounds. Graphics and text are all hand-drawn and written. It is a book structure where no glue or thread interrupts the playground, but the stage sets flip as pages. And Incomplete Sex Education is a performance with 4 personal short stories of my first sex education, American public school style. This book is closed like a leaf. And then in Act 1, I present this book swinging it like a penis. Opening up the book and wearing it like a skirt, like my flower. Planting the garden. Watering the incomplete sex education garden with words from my story. And pollinating the flowers. In Act 3, mochi is made and served to the audience. Serving up the erotic dessert in this audience, the women were more comfortable with the penis mochi than the men. From Edge Media Network, Atlanta. Visually striking, performative, funny, and well-crafted. My childhood bag lunches, a Chinese American experience, are large lithograph portrait prints of my childhood school lunches. My immigrant parents' traditional Chinese food hybrids with new American food that they were mixing. This is the United States of pork chop. There are also a series of bone-in meat sandwiches between Wonder Bread. These are drumsticks. The meat part is in silver ink. From internationally recognized artist and critic Buzz Spector. This project is excellent visually and conceptually. Your series adds to artists working with intersection of cooking and memory with an eloquent interrogation of identity. First food series are dioramas of my very first foods as a child. The stories are printed on cards, and there are 4 dioramas in an installation on a long table. In this story, as a girl, every week I was tasked to carry home and keep alive a large fish in a plastic bag. On the bus and train home, people stared at the Chinese girl with a live flipping fish. And then my dad would put it in our bathtub. I'd get a chair and be with it. This is another story. 2 from the Chinese American Fighter Club. This is in 2018. Told with spoken word alongside artist books, works on paper, and other objects and actions, I bring to life 2 badass members of my 19th century Chinese American Fighter Club, Thomas Sylvanus, or IUA, and Wang Chin-fu. Between these 2 heroic men, there is a runaway slave, Civil War soldier, renegade lecturer, civil rights activist, cultural educator, cuisine tour guide, humorist, newspaper founder and editor, and husband and father. I don't eat rats. The rat contains a squirrel inside. Historically, Chinamen were depicted as animals, eating animals, and as freak show attractions. Some of this still carries on to present day toward Asians. My poses mimic Victorian ads that Chinamen eat rats. In a turbulent time of racism, ignorance, and discrimination, these are inspirational stories about 2 remarkable immigrants who rose up and fought back against great adversity for their own American independence. Many Americans had never heard of these 2 heroes. They are part of a forgotten history that I am working to bring back to light. Here is my website and social media information. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Irene. Really incredible stuff. Up next, we have Colette Fu. So please, Colette, take it away.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Devin, and thank you, Erin, and thank you, BSA, for hosting us today, and special thanks to Tia for bringing us all together during these difficult times. Today, I wanted to share a project with you that I've been working on physically since 2008 and mentally since 1996. So that's me on the left in 1996 with a Yi woman from my mother's ancestral home near the border of Sichuan and Yunnan province. I went to Yunnan as part of a tour shortly after graduating from University of Virginia with a degree in French language and literature. During the tour, we visited a university for ethnic minority nationalities from around the province, and the dean invited me to teach English. That was the first time I had learned that my great-grandfather had not only been governor of the area, Yunnan province, but also had helped establish the school that we were visiting and was a very important figure in Yunnan and China history. So at the time in Charlottesville, I was only waitressing and working at a jewelry store. So I went home, packed my bags, and returned to Yunnan. So in Yunnan, I was based in Kunming, which is the capital. I picked up a passion for photography for the first time, mainly to document life there, to show my family and friends. I loved it so much that I stayed for 3 years and returned back to the States to formally study photography with the intent to return soon. Yunnan is China's most southwestern province, sharing borders with Tibet, Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam. It has snow-capped mountains to the northwest and tropical rainforests to the south. It's so rich in natural resources that it also has the largest diversity of plant life in China. This diversity also extends to its population as well. According to the most recent census conducted in China, which was in 2010, of the 1.3 billion population of China, less than 9% were ethnic minority nationalities. Most of these minority groups reside in autonomous regions and districts, which constitute 64% of China's total land. In summary, an autonomous region has its own local government and supposedly more legislative rights. The 5 autonomous regions of China are Xinjiang, Tibet, Inner Mongolia, Guangxi, and Ningxia. So one thing I didn't mention is there are 55 minority groups but 56 ethnic groups, and the Han represent the majority, which is the 91%. So in 2008, I received a Fulbright Fellowship where my proposal was to create a photographic pop-up book of the 25 ethnic minority nationalities of Yunnan province. My initial intent was to create an accessible commercial publication to create awareness of these people, but my path took another route as I started creating handmade editions. So I ziplined back to Yunnan over the Angry River. But when I arrived, only a decade later, life had changed drastically. This is a dye minority vendor in one of several Walmarts. There was now a drive-through McDonald's, Prada, and Haagen-Dazs, to name a few. But I found that if I was able to just travel even within a couple 100 kilometers, I could find life as it seemed in the 90s. This is a scan of the actual map I used back then to travel around Yunnan. In bold lettering, you see where the largest concentration of people was that I photographed. It was from traveling and reading maps and menus that I learned to actually read Chinese. The Ashi are one of 27 branches of the Yi minority, of which my mother is. Annually, they celebrate their fire festival to honor the man that brought them fire. Legend has it that once when the Ashi were naked and hunting, heavy rains came down, sending them to shelter under an old tree. An old wizard, Mudung, appeared, rubbed some dry wood together, and started a fire. The Ashi were no longer cold and learned how to cook food. This is a photo of a dye vendor at their annual water splashing festival. The Dai live in a lush subtropical area in southern Yunnan near river basins with exceptionally fertile soil. Their cuisine, I believe, is one of the least known but most flavorful culinary treasures in China. Similar to Thai food, it combines sour, spicy, salty, and sweet flavors, but has its own distinctive flavor. This book is about 34 inches wide. Here is an example of some, not all of the images that are in that previous book of the Dai food. This is Kaifuna, a Dulong woman in Northwest Yunnan along the borders of Tibet and Myanmar. Using thorn branches and ink made from ashes of burned pine tree, Dulong girls got their tattoos at puberty, and each clan had its own set of designs. The origin is not clear, but some claim that it was to make them unattractive to powerful neighboring tribes who enslaved the Dulong and went after their women. Dulong women believe that their tattoos resemble butterflies and that their souls turn into butterflies when they die. As of 2019, there were only 20 tattooed Dulong women left. This book is about it is 25 by 17 inches. And on the butterflies, I took photos, I printed photos of things that I passed along the walk to find Kaifuna. As the Han Chinese honor the dragon, Yi people worship the tiger as their grandest totem. Annually, under the direction of the Black Tiger King, the Yi offer sacrifices and dance to reflect the journey and way of life of the Yi people. The men dress up in felted tiger costumes and visit each house to guard the village from evils. They dance, mimicking surveying, plowing, harrowing, sowing, and weeding, all steps of the rice growing festival to ensure a healthy crop and long life for all. Thus, Loma, which is the title of the Tiger Festival in Yi language, was created to protect the village and display Yi people's tiger-length strength and valor. Oops. The Wa live along the borders of Yunnan and Myanmar. They regard the wooden drum as a divine tool that has exceptional power and is the symbol of existence and prosperity, while women uninhibitedly swing their long, black, shiny hair to the beat of drums. Their beat is slow and fast, representing anger, sadness, anxiety, and happiness. In 2014, I traveled to Xinjiang province while artist in residence at the Swatch Art Peace Hotel in Shanghai. The US Department of State had issued a travel advisory, but my tickets were non-refundable, so I couldn't cancel my trip. Turns out that terrorist threats are not a condition of getting air ticket refunds. Okay. This book, titled Uyghur Food, features typical and popular cuisine of the Uyghur nationality. In the front left, you see naan bread with traditional designs that are hand punched with a chicken feather stamp. The copper background is a classic kebab grill cart. The dishes are all placed on a traditional tablecloth and are surrounded with grapes from the Turpan Grape Valley. These grapes account for 80% of China's grapes and raisins. Hand-pulled noodles surround the spread. So Uyghurs are a Muslim Turkic ethnic group living within China's dominant Han and have been under Chinese control since the 18th century. In 1949, Uyghurs comprised 82% of the population. The Uyghur population today makes up under half, and hundreds and thousands are detained in re-education camps. Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region is now one of the most heavily policed regions in the world. So I went to Inner Mongolia to attend the Nadam Festival, which is a festival of three manly sports: archery, horse racing, and wrestling. The silk ribbons of red, green, yellow, white, and blue represent fire, water, earth, and air, the blue representing Mongolia. They signify the wrestler as sacred, as these scarves are also worn by animals sacrificed to their gods. There's a legend about Kutalun, great-granddaughter of Genghis Khan, who claimed that she would marry any man who wagered 100 horses and could beat her in wrestling. As a tribute to undefeated Kutalun, men now wear an open vest to prove to their opponents that they don't have breasts. And lastly, this is Taohua Yuanji, which loosely translates as utopia in Mandarin Chinese. The book is inspired by a famous 5th century Jing Dynasty poem about a fisherman who visited an isolated peach blossom valley where people seeking political refuge lived an ideal, harmonic life with nature and each other. For hundreds, Chinese people merely regarded this valley as imaginary. I visited a Zhuang minority village in 2008 that claimed to be the location described in this poem. So in 2017, I created an oversized version of Taohua Yuanji. This book measures 14 by 21 feet, and visitors were invited to enter the cave. The book was literally 1,100% the original size, and it was the first large pop-up I ever created. In the story, although villagers told the traveler not to tell of their location, he vainly marked his path and sent government officials who were unable to find it. To the Chinese, this story is metaphoric to an imaginary, unattainable utopia. And although I traveled there in 2008, I have not told anyone how to get there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colette. Incredible stuff. Our next speaker is Radha Pandey. So Radha, why don't you take it away, please?
Hi, everybody. First off, I'd like to thank Tia and the BSA for making this event possible and for all of you for being here. I'd like to begin by talking about the environment, man-made, natural, physical, and psychological environments. Their subtle yet dominant presence affects the work that I make, which in turn affects how I perceive the world around me. I was most influenced by kozo, or Japanese paper, my mother brought back from Japan when I was a child. Not realizing then that paper could be transparent, I remember it changing the way I thought about it. Working at a paper mill in South India, where this picture was taken during college, also affected my perception of the material. And these experiences with paper have played an integral role in my work going forward. This book is called Abies spectabilis. It is an exploration of a native species of the East Himalayan fir found in small pockets in Afghanistan, China, India, and Nepal. I remember sitting in a small grove of this forest in the middle of a hill station in North India and feeling completely transported. And this book was a way for me to recreate the sense of peace that I felt there. The trees were different around me in Iowa, and I was thinking a lot about the types of evergreens back home and all the tropical foliage. This is also one of the first books for which I made all the paper using abaca. And I chose it because it makes a sound like walking on dry leaves when you turn the pages. And that spread from the previous slide opens out to what I consider the heart of the book, this illustration. And even though I was quite happy with how this turned out, I did think that it was quite flat. And so I decided to make it more dimensional in the form of a tunnel book, for which I also made the paper. So the frames are hemp, and then the bits that are suspended in those frames are kozo. The back panel is waxed, and that allows the light to come in a much more diffused way. And so you can actually view the book from both sides. When you view it from the back with light coming through, it works more like a shadow book. This photograph was taken seconds after a flock of birds flew off the treetops. And it was this moment that led me to create this cutout. But again, it seemed quite stark, and the day had been pretty cloudy. And so I decided to capture that moment better using a watermark. So for that, I got a piece of laser cut plastic and fixed it onto a mold. And so a watermark is created when something is blocking the drainage of pulp on a paper mold. So in this case, it's my laser cut illustration that's blocking the drainage. So wherever this blockage is, there's thinner amounts of pulp, and everywhere else there's a thicker amount of pulp, which leads to a thickness and thinness in the same sheet of paper, which then gives you a watermark, just like your banknote. So I decided to use that image and turn it into a stop motion animation. So this is only 4 seconds, it'll play in a loop, but that 4 seconds swallowed up a year and a half of my life just trying to figure out how to do it. But what I really enjoyed was combining a traditional technique and a contemporary solution for that technique. That animation formed part of my thesis work at the University of Iowa, along with a book for which I made about 400 sheets of paper using a hemp cotton blend. This paper was meant to emulate papers made in the 16th century in Europe. They were used for this book, Anatomia Botanica, which is about 3 species of flowering plants that affected the way I saw my natural world around me. This is an illustration of the southern magnolia. And these illustrations were inspired by 16th to 18th century European and American herbals like this one. as well as 16th century books of anatomy. So the illustrations in this book allow the reader to pull back the movable flaps to reveal the inner workings of the plants. And they're done using reduction linoleum. This one is about 16 colors, but the rest of them are anywhere between 4 and 10. So these movable pieces were printed separately and cut out, and then attached to the final prints or the base layer in a method very similar to those anatomical flap books. Learning about the history of taxonomy provided a bridge to my next project, which is called the Taxonomy of Shapes, and I completed that at Women's Studio Workshop. It's the taxonomy of the circle, the square, and the triangle. The first page has this key with about 60 plus elements that are man-made and natural. And this key is repeated on every page, which is then overlaid with these map folds with cutouts. So these cutouts accentuate different parts of that spread and classify the spread into that particular taxonomical shape. And so you have very strange things in the same category, like an octopus, the moon sometimes, an open mouth, a toilet bowl, a shell, a clock, things that are seemingly random. So that's the taxonomy for the square and the triangle. And so the book begs the question why we need a taxonomical system of classification at all. It doesn't take into account evolutionary change. And so things are constantly evolving and changing, but we're still trying to put them into these categories. The binding is in a throughout accordion format, and it's meant for display. The history of papermaking in India between the 14th and 17th centuries is of particular interest to me. My research into the subject of how this paper was made and treated has created several inroads into my creative work. And one of those aspects that I explore a lot is the finishing techniques for this type of paper. For example, this work explores the particular quality of Islamicate paper that makes it excellent for calligraphy. I worked on this collaborative project with calligrapher Cheryl Jacobson and made all the paper in the Indo-Islamic style and then sent it to her. And she found a text that is explored through the book, after which she sent the pages back to me to bind. Researching and replicating historical recipes for natural dyes on paper led to this book, Deep Time, a book about erosion and sedimentation and the action of water and soil that shape the highest points on our planet, which are the cutout shapes. So those are the Tibetan Plateau, the Andean Mountain Range, and the Kanzigal Range in East China. The book pages have been dyed in indigo and clove. And so as you progress through the book, that relationship also changes between water and soil, and you're also physically eroding and sedimenting the book as you go through it. It ends on a text spread, and all the pages have been letterpress printed using wood engravings of the topography of the area around Mount Everest. So as you progress through it, you notice that you're climbing higher and higher. Those engravings get tighter and tighter. My latest book is called Algal Fungal. This book is about 3 species of lichen that I found growing on this one little twig the size of my palm. So this illustration is to scale, and these are also wood engravings. I wanted it to appear as if the lichen was growing on or off the pages. And then at the same time, balance the text on the verso, like this. I'm currently working on a book about floral portraiture in the Mughal miniature tradition, which is, I guess you could consider it the medieval period, and how it was impacted by colonial interests in the commercialization of plants. So this book will address the way the then existing Indian culture of miniatures as appreciation of natural beauty became secondary to the European scientific aesthetic. The nature of the Mughal manuscript and illumination patronized for the sheer love of plants was demolished by the European scientific botanical created for the colonialization of plants. The paper that I plan to use will be traditionally made using raw hemp and recycled papers, similar to those that were used for those original miniature paintings in the Mughal courts. And these papers will be made by a family in India. The illustrations of the book will be done using multiple wood engraved blocks in collaboration with a miniature painter, who will then add finishing touches or embellishments to the images as he sees fit, completing the illustration. The layouts, image and text placement, and the paper used for this book will all reflect and take inspiration from the Islamic manuscript tradition in India. These will be accompanied by couplets written in Urdu about these specific flowers, with translations in English and Hindi. The placement and typography of these elements, which I'm still working on, will be based on Islamic geometry. There'll also be one or two fold-out elements in the form of maps showing trade routes. And I should mention all the plants that I've chosen have no commercial value except beauty. The illustrated section of the book will open left to right as in an Islamic manuscript. And this will be juxtaposed with a supporting text in English with that part of the book opening right to left. And the whole thing will collapse back into a standard format. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Radha. Really, I'm sort of speechless with everyone's contributions today, and have the pressure now of having to close us out with the last presentation. So before I get going here, I'd just like to remind everyone that if you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A function. And after I finish, we'll turn to your questions. In an interview with the famous book artist Xu Bing, he summarized why and how books stood at the center of cultural imaginations for his generation, those born between the mid-1950s and 1960s in China. He noted that my generation has a very awkward relationship with words in books. By the time of the Cultural Revolution, I could read, but there weren't any books available. The whole country only read one book, Mao's Little Red Book. At the end of the Cultural Revolution, I returned from the countryside. I was starving for books. That hunger for and alienation from books pervades Xu Bing's work. His production of thousands of woodblock printed texts is a sense of his desperation for books. Their script, fictitious heavenly script seen in this image here, denies readers access to his paradise. The anxiety over text is also evident in the work of Chen Xinmao. In his history book series, Chen printed woodblock over woodblock over woodblock. In this, we get the sense of a once legible tradition, crushed by the confines of the page and the density of the ink. It becomes darkness under the weight of multiple conflicting impressions. Interpretive authority and legibility have been lost. Works like Xu Bing's and Chen Xinmao's have dominated discussions of contemporary Chinese book arts. The trauma the Cultural Revolution inflicted on China's boomer generation has broadcast images of cultural destruction through films and autobiographies. When I began studying Chinese in the early 2000s, the representations of Maoist book burning campaigns, such as seen in this image, and the anti-intellectual violence of the Cultural Revolution were so strong that I firmly believed received narratives of disrupted traditions. Like many stories about things Chinese, these narratives of individual truth, these individual traumas, could not account for the millions of alternatives, resistance found in adaptation, subversion. With the 1980s, and the reemergence of traditional Chinese arts, Today we're in something of a renaissance. Scholar artists like Wei Lijong, based in Hangzhou, who's founded the Shizhujai studio, have led to a revitalization of some of the high arts of Chinese xylographic printing. Today in my talk, I'll be talking about those rural, less celebrated printing traditions that have recently started to reemerge. In 2018, I was in Chengdu in Sichuan, and during that time, I visited the Qingyang Temple. The temple is the sort of site that appears in A Lonely Planet. It's famous for two bronze statues of goats. This Qingyang in the Qingyang Temple are these bronze goats, green goats. But for scholars, the temple is famous for something else entirely. It's an important site of Taoist revival, especially in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I was drawn to the temple because since 1993, the temple has been using over 10,000 surviving late Qing period wood blocks. They're now over 100 years old. Print the Daozang Jiyao, a collection of over 100 religious texts. It took me approximately an hour to find the printing house, which is tucked into the corner of the temple. The house itself is a modest affair. Master Zhou, seen in the image here, is a Taoist priest who's in charge with operations, and he works with 2 laywomen volunteers and a novice priest. The volunteers, who prefer not to be named, divided labor fairly simply. On one side, a person printed sheets by pulling them from a block, and you can see how fast this is right now. So she pulls a sheet about once every 25 to 30 seconds. And then on the other side is a female volunteer who was involved in binding and gathering the sheets. So here you can see individual sheets being folded over, and here is the stack of sheets waiting. And so it averaged about 10 hours a day in the print shop, and all of this is done for the sake of religious merit. Engaging in these sorts of printing activities, disseminating religious texts, was something that people firmly believe generated positive results for them and their ancestors in the afterlife. The books printed at the Qingyang Temple are illustrative of the full range of the Chinese printing tradition. Generally speaking, there are 2 formats of religious texts. First, there are the so-called Suture Bindings, which are these long rectangular forms. These are accordion folded sheets, and many sheets of paper are sort of pasted together and then folded up into boards. And here you can see how if you open this up, you can see a full illustration. And you can also get a sense of how these are useful texts, useful binding structures for religious texts, since as you open them for chanting, they stay open for you. So this style of binding is common in Buddhist and Taoist texts, which are frequently chanted. Other form of binding that we find in the Qingyang Temple texts are these string-bound books. This is a more traditional structure that we encounter in pre-modern Chinese books. So here we have the string. This is a generally ornamental binding. And when you open the book, you see the imprint. And this binding is used for texts that are generally religious or philosophical. So this is the Taoist classic, the Tao Te Ching, with commentaries by local Sichuan priests. The interesting thing about this binding structure is in flea markets throughout China, you'll find that people will take modern Western style bound books, cut the spine off and then rebind them into this string binding. Now, these books raise many questions that are worth considering and force us to think about, for example, the meaning of edition in the case of Chinese books. While the woodblocks are the same as those used in the late 19th and early 20th century, the disruption in printing traditions, easily seen in the choices of paper, as well as the material aspects of the book. You see a crack right here. That means gives you a good indication that these are old blocks, as well as some of the more idiosyncratic practices in the printing house, allow us to really start thinking about the temporality that woodblock printing allows for and some of its difficulties. And for me as a bibliographer, it makes me wonder, what does Bowers tell us? How can we consider the history and trauma of these woodblocks, which were hidden through most of the 20th century to avoid being burned? Soon after visiting the Qingyang Temple, I took a trip to Mianzhu, another center for the revival of printing, to learn what happened to a type of printing called New Year's printing, Nianhua. Unlike the printing occurring at the Qingyang Temple, Nianhua printing has received substantial amounts of government investment and support over the last 2 decades. And when we look at New Year's prints, it's easy to see why they've started attracting popular attention. The prints are riots of color, and they harken back to a lost China, one in which families gathered together, hung these prints up every year, and celebrated the New Year's together as a family. And currently the CCP is reinvesting in reinvigorating these sort of quote unquote traditional Chinese practices. So folk arts like Nianhua printing have received substantial support and enthusiasm from scholars and the government alike. That even means that these rural villages are getting new students. Traditionally, Nianhua printing occurred along family lines. Fathers would teach sons. But now children who grew up in the countryside would prefer to go to cities to find work. But artists are flocking to these Nianhua tourist villages to get trained by traditional masters, like Mr. Xu seen here. And here in Mianzhu, they hand color all of their prints, but the blocks are still carved. So it's single color printing, in contrast to the Nianhua in many parts of China, where you see this multicolor woodblock printing for these traditionally auspicious symbols. So in conclusion, since we're running short on time, I think that considering the revival of printing in places like Qingyang, the Qingyang Temple, and the Mianzhu Nianhua village, it makes us clear that these narratives of 20th century destruction and loss need to be reconsidered. So woodblock printing is alive and well in many parts of China. In fact, most provinces have several analogs to Mianzhu and the Qingyang Temple. Moreover, if we explore this revitalization in light of the relatively neglected Chinese multicolor printing tradition, these are late Qing prints you see here, we can begin to reappreciate the full scale of Chinese printing and book arts. And this will allow us to begin reclaiming and redefining a tradition that has suffered under the shadow of imperialism, a tumultuous 20th century, as well as government persecution and now support. So thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I just want to thank all of our panelists for presenting today. And it is 1:30 on the nose, and we don't have any questions in the Q&A box. I think, like me, everyone was just paying rapt attention to the presentation. So I do invite you, if you're on Twitter, to send some questions that might come up afterward our way, you can use the hashtag collectivexBSA, and I'll make sure that those questions get to our presenters. But other than that, thank you so much to Devin, Irene, Colette, and Radha for joining us today and for their fantastic presentations. And I hope to see you all again at another BSA event. Take care. Bye.